Family systems therapy is what we now look at. And the family systems therapy approaches, it's not possible to say family therapy, period. There are many, many different approaches to working with families. But something that all family therapy approaches have in common is it represents a paradigm shift from the individual theories that you've been studying that we've been looking at so far. This approach basically says that you cannot understand the individual apart from the context of the family system. So if you try to pluck the individual out of the family and talk about the individual's problem without some kind of relationship with family context, you're not really doing effective work. And this approach is very useful, at least to get us thinking more about how is the family a dynamic influence in the life of an individual. Even if you're seeing an individual client for individual therapy, I still think it's important to think about how the family and the family of origin has influenced your personality and the shaping of your current problems. Family therapy really entails sitting down with an entire family, ideally, hopefully the entire family. Now, sometimes a member won't come in, and so they may work with a part of a family. But something this approach, all of the approaches have in common, is they look at the unit as a whole and what are the possible factors that are causing tension or disruption within that unit. There are different schools of family therapy that we introduce, and if you take a family therapy course, you'll probably study all of these different approaches. Like there are Adlerian family therapists, then there are multi-generational family therapists. Basically, they say you have to go back several generations to really work and understand an individual. And then there's Satir's, Virginia Satir's model of doing family therapy, which is largely based upon the person-centered approach. She worked very closely with Carl Rogers, and Virginia Satir was a very dynamic woman who really would work magic on the stage when she would work with a family. Then there's experiential family therapy, primarily by Whitaker, Carl Whitaker. And that approach is very much like existential therapy, but applied to families. There's the structural and strategic brand of family therapy, and there are recent innovations of family therapy, namely the postmodern approaches. So you can have narrative family therapy, and you can have solution-focused brief therapy applied to family therapy. So I hope you're seeing, I don't intend to go through each of these branches. I just want you to see that family therapy is very complex and multifaceted. But what we're really interested in is how does the system affect the individual, and how can the individual differentiate from the system that he or she lives. This takes a lot of training if you want to do family therapy. It takes going through probably your own family therapy as a patient, as a client, but it certainly takes a lot of coursework and supervision in family therapy, family process, and family dynamics. And some of you may want to move into the terrain of becoming a family therapist. Even if you don't, I think it's helpful to attend some workshops and maybe take some courses in family therapy to understand that modality, to understand that perspective, because it helps us, I think, get a better appreciation of the individual if we can appreciate the context, if we can appreciate how the family has a current influence on the individual. particularly when we're talking about working with culturally diverse individuals. A member may say, client may say, well, my family, you have to really understand that it's more collectivistic, that I was taught not to think of myself as an individual. I was taught more to think of what's good for the whole family and the whole collective. Now you see, you'd have to work differently with that individual because of that family's cultural background. So culture is a very important part of family therapy. And it can be intimidating thinking of working with families because many of you will say, I have a hard enough time thinking of working with one individual, and if I'm going to sit down and work with all the members of a system, that increases my anxiety. That's why supervision is important, and that's why it's important to get a lot of training and studying in this particular area. And there have been a lot of textbooks written on family therapy, so you don't have to do this in isolation. But this is an approach to psychotherapy, a very important approach, and a perspective that at least, if you don't take a course in family therapy, hopefully you have one chapter that you can at least acquaint you with this way of thinking about therapy.